Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. Liv, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Busy. What are you doing in your life now? What do you do non-season when you're not commentating and doing things? What do you have a big girl job, or what do you do?
I do have a big girl job. I work for a digital ad agency called Huge. It's based out of Dumbo in Brooklyn in New York. And I work on their corporate comms team. We do internal and external public relations, corporate comms. Yeah, it's fun. I like that I do something that has nothing to do with gymnastics, but it does make me miss the gymnastics time when season rolls around.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I think from all the friends that I have that are ex-college gymnasts, or some are like, they love the separation. They love like having almost like a Clark Kent and a Batman or whatever, or a Superman, or what I would say. And some people just want to be in it all the time. Like I think Sam's a good example, right? Like Sam wants to be in it at all times, commentating, Beam Queen boot camp, everything. I think she doesn't want to get into football commentating. I think that's her dream though. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
but she wants to be there all times, no matter what.
I love that. Yeah, it gets addicting for sure.
Yeah. How did you get into the whole commentating thing? Was it just like you asked someone like, hey, can I just do the Michigan meets? And they're like, hey, can I do the Big Ten? And like, hey, can I work for ESPN or something?
Kind of. So when I was a freshman, had no idea what I was doing and ended up winning an all-around at a meet that was televised by the Big Ten Network and was interviewed by Alina Weinstein, who was doing the commentary analyst side, and Dean Linke, who I work with now. And we had a really fun time. I joked with, Bev at Michigan and with all my friends. Both my parents were actors. And so I feel like I have a really good headspace of public speaking.
Yeah.
So I did the interview, it went pretty well, whatever. And I always just like would wave to Dean and Alina when we would like do Big Ten meets. And then my senior year on practice day, I like stopped by just to say hi. I was like, I feel like I always wave to you, but I haven't seen you since I was a freshman, like introduced myself. Like, I love what you guys do. I would love to get into it when I graduate, whatever. And literally contacted Dean after I graduated, and he got me in touch with Big Ten, and here we are.
That's sweet. That's pretty cool. Love connections.
I know. He's the best. He's been a great mentor in the broadcast side, and our producer, Jim Ressler, has been amazing and just kind of teaching me the ropes and how to do it. So it's been really fun. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what actually goes on behind the scenes to get a basic production off is ludicrous. Like I've seen like Alicia or you or Sam take pictures, John too, like the amount of notes and research and like all you have to do is bonkers, right?
I'm totally a psycho about research because my least favorite thing is not giving credit where credit is due, or mispronouncing a name, or not knowing that they redshirted or whatever. Because I know when I was an athlete, I really appreciated when people prioritize those details. And so I make sure to do all my research, but it's a lot. Like I'll finish my job at 5 o'clock, 5:30, whatever, and start gymnastics research. And ultimately it's fairly easy, so to speak, because I watch all the meets the week before. I like to know the score. I like to know if she had a mistake on bars the week before and then doesn't the next week. And so it just shows, progression and whatnot. But it's a lot of work, especially when you want to be that in it, which I want to be.
Yeah, and let alone the research, but then also like the practices, the actual like learning how to broadcast and like learning how to do that like dance. Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong also, but like most of the time it's not like everyone on the squad. It's like all former gymnasts. You have one person who's kind of like a talking head from just a generalized sports context. And I feel like half the time you guys are educating them on what gymnastics is actually like. And then the other half of the time you're trying to actually call a meet and do whatever.
Yeah, that's been one of the fun things actually is Dean will say to me, I'm going to ask you what that means so that you have the opportunity to describe it, so that I know a lot of people watching probably don't know what that technical term means, but I like that you're using it because the people that are watching that know what it means appreciate that kind of technical analysis. So yeah, it's also been fun teaching him and Jim and whatever, but I've commentated with Roethlisberger and it's just like technical after technical after technical. And sometimes like it's great because he and I will both kind of analyze something together. And then other times it's just like you kind of have to slow it down a bit so that people that are watching are not like, what language are they speaking? Because I'm so confused. But it's a really fun way to learn how to talk about a sport the way you would want to hear it if you were watching.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why this is my next question was it must be really exciting commentating now, particularly when there's like an absolute moonshot slingshot going on with popularity, right? Like in the last 3 to 4 years in particular, it's been insane to see how big the viewership has gotten. And I feel like I really appreciate when, as a hardcore gymnastics person, I obviously appreciate the technical side, but then as someone who really wants the sport to win as a whole, I like having someone who's not as technical because they can ask those quote unquote noob questions. And like someone at home, like if I'm watching with friends or if I'm watching with like my mom or something like that, she's like, I have no idea what's going on, but like they're doing a good job telling me what I should look out for. And like, I think that's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, the sport obviously has grown so much in the last 3 or 4 years, but also different teams are succeeding and teams are making it into the top 10, the elite 8 that hadn't before. And so the Cinderella story, so to speak, the new like changing of the throne of like who's at the top is changing. And that's what makes it exciting for viewers when the same people are winning and whatever, and it's predictable. Why would you want to watch that much? And so I'm loving that in particular, and specifically in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is really ramping up in recruiting and talent and everything. And so it's been fun to go from being an athlete in it to being a spectator, fan, and then commentator to watch how the Big Ten has gained a lot of respect and attention lately.
Yeah. And I think there's obviously a double-edged sword to when those shuffles happen is like my heart breaks for sometimes those big teams that really have like a rough meet and like kind of the wheels fall off and you're like, ooh, I've been there before, but it opens the door for someone to have just an insane season. Do you have a personal favorite of like a shuffle or a team you watched this year or last year that you're like so pumped to see them do well? Cause I definitely have one in mind.
Yeah. Michigan State. 100%.
Yeah, that was mine.
I almost can't fathom that improvement and excitement from that program. And every time I've talked to Mike or Nicole or Whitney, they always tell me that the girls were really the ones that came into the gym and were like, let's do it, And I know their freshman class is stacked with talent, but they're also really confident young women that came into the program, not afraid to have a voice. And I think sometimes as a freshman, it's a little daunting to come into things and not know where your place is to speak up. And when watching them, they were just a cohesive unit of athletes. There was never you could never tell who was really a veteran and who wasn't. They all seemed so amazing. Another team for me that I've just loved watching grow is Maryland. I love what they have going on.
Shout out JJ and Brett. They're good friends of mine. Full disclosure.
Love Brett Nelligan so much and everything he has going on at that program. And Audrey Barber is obviously like one of the greatest NCAA athletes ever. So
JJ was my senior captain at Springfield.
No way.
He's like best
I'm
friends.
personally a huge fan of theirs. So seeing those programs really just kind of kick it up a notch has been exciting for me.
Yeah. And also too, back to MSU is I have to like disclosure. One of my favorite athletes I've worked with all time, Katie Sawyer, is a freshman year. And she's like the kindest human ever. So when she went, I was like, yes, great spot. And then they started just rocketing. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, it's so fun to watch, when you have people who are kind of all over the place. It's cool.
I know. I found myself rooting for Michigan State in a lot of places. And I was like, wow, if you had asked me 5 or 6 years ago if I would ever root for Michigan State, I would say no. But because of this team, it really just put them on the map in a way that is so special and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, some of those like first day, second day, like regionals were just unbelievable to watch, like people making second day or people getting a spot. Like it was crazy.
It was crazy. And one more that I just thought of is Iowa too. Yeah. I've always loved what Iowa has going on. I mean, that is just a party in a team. I think their energy is off the charts. But like, they're not just fun. They're really talented. They're doing hard gymnastics. And you see that come up when athletes are making it to the regional and national level, and they're doing amazing. Like Adeline Kenlin got national runner-up on balance beam. Yeah. Like that doesn't happen because you're a fun program. That happens because you put in a lot of hard work and you also have a lot of fun. So I'm a huge Big Ten Gymnastics fan. Sometimes people are always like, do you watch other schools? I'm like, yes, I do. I'm up to date. I just love the Big Ten.
Yeah. And then the next question I have is I internally struggle. Maybe this is from like men's gymnastics, and I'm wondering if you do too, is like the tug of war between viewership and the 10-0 chase and like the drama and like acting as you like, there's clearly a lot of acting. Like, I know some of these coaches by person, I'm like, dude, you're never that excited ever when somebody goes well, but like it's a tug of war between like promoting the sport and viewership and like really high scores and like half of a tenth and quarter of a tenth. And then as like a true hardcore gymnastics fan, I'm like, God, a 2.5 is the same as like a 1.5, and like difficulty. Like some people could be doing like full out laid outs and they're like watering down, and like I really struggle internally, especially with men's gymnastics, because men's gymnastics at college level is ridiculous, right? That's our national team. So I'm wondering if you have the same internal dilemma that I think a lot of us do.
Yeah, I think it's so hard when someone's doing, a double layout on floor or a full in, and it's valued the same as a front double twist. It's just like viewers don't understand that. But to us, that's just like you want to see the fly high, stick the landing, tumbling and whatnot. And people don't understand that dichotomy there. But the thing about men's gymnastics that I actually was asked to commentate a men's gymnastics meet this year. And I was like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I can't do that. And he was like, why? And I'm like, it would be a disservice to men's gymnastics because I don't know enough to elevate the sport. I would sound like an idiot. And I take what I do very seriously. I take my notes seriously. I take having an expert view on the sport really seriously. And I would love to learn more about men's gymnastics. I think it's one of the most exciting and fascinating sports ever. And I hate to see it just slowly dwindle because it's unbelievably exciting when people really know what they're watching. But the system of scoring is very tricky. Because everyone knows the Nadia Comaneci perfect 10. Everyone knows what a perfect 10 means. But when someone's getting like a 15 on pommel horse and you're kind of like, do you understand how impressive that is? And everyone else is like, no. It's so hard to elevate the sport and make it exciting, like getting a 9975 when you need a 995 to win. It's just so much harder to navigate, which is such a bummer because all those guys are doing elite national team Olympic track. So it's hard to say, okay, men's gym's out of a 10 too. That would just not work.
Yeah. It's almost like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because at one part you have, again, like you said, is like that is a good half of our national team, if not more. And so you want them to do that because every time the Olympics come around and we have this amazing caliber talent pool of people to pull from, everyone's so pumped and it's so awesome. And I'm really good friends with Dave Durrani, who was an 08 team member, and he was the athlete rep for a while. And he was like, listen, guys, if we can men's gymnastics, like it's not going to hurt that year, that off year, it's going to hurt in 4 years when we have literally no one at the national level who's competitive. And people will be like, oh, I can't believe the Olympic team is doing so bad. It's like, well, you cut the men's gymnastics pipeline. And so like, what do you expect to happen? You have to either build an alternative structure for guys to get national team funding and find a way to do it, or we have to find some way to reinvigorate the men's college gymnastics side. And there are new programs starting, which is awesome, which is really cool. But in my mind, I feel like we're going to need to do a little bit of partnership work between men's and women's to get some of that, juice back inside of it.
And I know there's been conversation on different levels of combining Big Ten men's and women's and combining national men's and women's. And I love that idea because ultimately the fans that watch women's gymnastics would love to watch men's gymnastics and vice versa. I know every time we competed with teams that would have like a Beauty and the Beast meet with wrestling, those wrestling fans, especially in the Big Ten, wrestling's huge. Those fans would love to watch gymnastics, and gymnastics fans would love to watch wrestling. Ultimately, they're elevating both sports by combining and having a fun event that you can take your son and your daughter to. Like, how cool is that? And so I definitely would love to see more collaboration between the sports. Anything the women's side can do with this crazy growth position we're in right now to help men's gymnastics is what we should be doing, because to see men's gymnastics go away would be a huge loss.
Yeah. And I would love nothing more than to have a 4-day event of both nationals where it turns into like a mini Congress, right? So like the guys can take the Friday, Sunday spots. And honestly, like it would be as someone who works with a lot of programs consulting wise, like it would be great to have a day off in between and not have like a relentless schedule for those for the teams that make it. But like having the girls do Thursday, Saturday night, they still get the prime time Saturday night, elevated stage situation, and the guys could do Friday and Sunday. But you could also turn it into a massive like fun event for a 3-day weekend in some town. There's like vendors, there's more sponsorships, there's way more viewership. Like that would be, I would block my schedule every single year to go with that for the rest of my life. That'd be dope.
Totally. And the women this year did have a day in between. And I talked to some of the athletes and I was like, what did you guys think of that? Because I remember when we did regionals for the first time back to back, it was that new format when I was a senior.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it, but I could see how it could hurt, obviously, your body, your mind, everything. And some of them were like, oh, the day in between was great. And some of them were like, I just wanted to get it over with. Like, let's just ride the adrenaline train and do it. So I see both sides. I also see that, prelims too, they're at a disservice because then they have less recovery time before the meet the next day. So I see the reason why they did that, but they're almost setting it up perfectly to add men's right there. It's almost just a perfect setup for combining, and I hope they do.
Yeah, and closely related, not that I was going to go down this angle, but I was fortunate to talk to all the college coaches at nationals this year and give some lectures on our research and stuff. And, of course, the Achilles tear situation is a big conversation. And like everyone was like, tell me what the spring floor is, tell me what the technique is. And I'm like, guys, there's like massive low hanging fruit here that I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but like the density of season and these like triple, meets in a row, like they'll fly into like a Friday night, Saturday night, and then go the next week and do another Friday night, Saturday. I'm like, guys, like I understand it all. I run a business, the finances of having a lot of meets and traveling a lot, and you're trying to get your budget. Like I completely get that you have some schools that have what seems like a moonshot budget and some that are barely getting a team together on a bus. But like that is a huge problem. Like it is really a huge problem that like the density, like you go from club and elite where you compete every week or like once per month or every other month or something like that. And then in season, it's like, and we put like 14 meets like all right in a row. Like that is a real problem, like for all injuries, not just Achilles tears, but that's definitely one.
Yeah. Everyone always asks me like, what's with this like epidemic of Achilles tears? And I feel like my year when I tore mine, I was in that year of like the entire world tore their Achilles.
Yeah.
And it was just such a conversation. And I remember talking to Lou, our strength coach, and Lisa Haas, our athletic trainer, literally two of the best people I know. And them being like, we just have to double down on all the strength and all of the rehab we're doing, because ultimately that's what we can do right now is we can get ahead of it. We can't, obviously I had surgery, I recovered, etc. But like we can get ahead of this and do some preventative stuff a little more rigorously with the entire team instead of people who are prone to, Achilles pain or shoulder pain or whatnot. And so it became a really nice way of adding that into our workouts.
Yeah. Was that 2018? I don't know what year it was for you.
Yeah, I was 18.
Yeah. So that was the year that Ellen and I started our survey study, because in the first month, I think 6 weeks, there were 25 tears. And Ellen and I, that was pre-pandemic. So you couldn't make that argument that it was like a ramp back up. And Ellen and I were like, yo, what? Ellen is the, Dr. Casey is the women's team national physician. We were like,
he was my doctor.
Oh,
and,
nice.
I went and saw her for my back when I was 15 years old in Chicago.
That's amazing.
I love her.
I literally just got off the phone with this. That's so funny. We just chatted. But yeah, that's what I like texted her. I was like, Elle, we got it. Like, this is bad, man. Like, this is bad. And that came like the survey and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think I agree. I think that I get a lot of questions about that too. Obviously, authoring that paper is like, one, you have to realize is that data we put out was survey data. That's not like high quality data. That was like out of 500 people and 100 tears happened. But yeah, I think that strength conditioning is just massive, right? And I actually do want to pivot the conversation into like Lou and like your experience starting, because at the college level, literally every single team I work with lifts in the summer and does it. And then like at JO and club, it's like, don't look at a weight. Like, how dare you even consider doing that? But like the obvious answers are, let's get a little stronger with science and let's be a little bit more smart about our workload management, particularly when they're young. And so I'd love to hear as much as we could do to give Lou the shout out that he needs, because he deserves all of it. But I would love to hear like your experience of coming into Michigan and being, because was that the first time you lifted freshman year?
It was the first time I lifted.
Yeah. How was that? Walk me through that.
From what I remember, I didn't really understand what it meant. Obviously in club, my club did a really good job of doing preventative rehab and preventative, conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
We never did anything like squatting or RDLs or whatever, but we definitely did use weights for certain things. But I remember walking into, at that point, we were in like this, at the NAT, this like basement gym that honestly I love, even though we now have this like absolutely positively gorgeous facility. The NAT has a special place in my heart. And Lou pretty much takes the freshmen through like a crash course of how to lift, how to properly use the weights, how to properly rack them, how to add them onto the side of the whatever. Like, he's very meticulous about teaching. Even if someone has lifted before, he's really good about being like, okay, let's like break this down so that no one gets hurt trying to do this,
Sure.
And I remember just being confused. I wouldn't say I was very sore, so to speak. Definitely felt it here and there, but I started feeling stronger already. And something I know that I always struggled with in club is I could never end a floor routine with a double pike. I just didn't have the endurance. My legs didn't have the strength. I just couldn't do it. And Bev is huge about ending with a double pike. Before the added bonus came in where you get an extra temp for ending with it, that was kind of her curriculum, was like, we want an E-pass combo and with a double back or a double pike. And that was my goal. And between cardio and conditioning workouts in the gym and Lou really helping us with leg strength and body strength, I did it all 4 years. And so I think a big thing when it comes to lifting is that Lou and the whole athletic, training team, athletic training and lifting, they know what they're talking about. They know how to make you stronger. They know how to work on body parts to help make it stronger. And he and Lisa are like the tag team of the century. Like, they connect on everything. So-and-so's having shoulder pain. Lou has exactly what to do to strengthen these muscles. Lisa knows the rehab, whatever. And they kill it because ultimately it has to be both ends of it. But I loved lifting. In fact, my senior year, my teammate Lexi Funk and I asked Lou to do another lift session during the week. And on Wednesdays, we would go in there and we would squat extra because it really helped us and made us stronger. And he's so good about, if you go in and say, hey, I have some extra time, I would love to work on this, he will write you a program and be right on top of it. Even if he can't be there with you, someone's supervising, everyone knows what you're working on and what you need. And he's created that culture, especially for gymnastics and softball, which he has.
Yeah. And I think it's just a huge shout out to Lisa and Lou, who also, I know pretty well, is it's like, they're like unicorns, right? They're people who are willing to kind of go into the trenches. And Lou particularly was like, he knew nothing about gymnastics from what he told me when he started. And he really had to put in a ton of work to understand the sport and the demands of the sport. And I see both sides. I understand all too well how challenging it is to find a strength coach who understands gymnastics and is not going to, just destroy someone and like they can't vault the next day. Like that's a very important skill set. And it takes a lot of humility as a strength coach to program in a way that's like, okay, I'm helping you complement your gymnastics training. I'm not going to overtake, other people. And then on the other side, though, I see a lot of sometimes frustration because there's so much good evidence and good science to support that lifting would substantially help the performance of gymnasts and just reduce injuries by a staggering fold. But then like, even at the college level, sometimes it's really challenging, but at the club level, it's still like brutal, man. Like, some coaches are not only not in favor of it, they actively talk against it, saying like it's a complete waste of time. And this is like the I can't believe we would even consider giving up another half hour of practice to go towards lifting. And like, in my mind, if we could have people start introducing lifting at like 12 years old or 14 years old during puberty, I think that the long tail of performance and college injuries would just be staggeringly lower. But I'm also very biased, so I don't coach elites. I don't produce level 10s that go get college scholarships. So I don't really have the best, well-rounded perspective there.
No, I agree with you. I think that the other thing that Lou and Lisa did a really good job with always is they are unicorns. They will do whatever it takes to help you, but they need that equal buy-in from you. And part of what I noticed from both of them, because I was the kind of person that was like, you're the expert, just help me kind of thing. Right. And I know some people on our team definitely had their own ideas of what strength and conditioning and rehab looked like. But I know for a fact that when you go to Lisa and Lou and you say, I really want to work on my strength, or my lower extremities hurt and don't feel strong enough, how can I help?
Mm.
They will do it. And if you buy in, they will help you do that. And so I know for myself, I almost every day coming back from my Achilles, I lifted with Lou and did rehab with Lisa. It was like my thing, like lift, rehab, go to the gym. You know, when the time came, I could do some handstands and whatever. You know, I made sure to start building up that upper body bar strength. As we know, upper body bar strength and just upper body strength, totally different things.
Yeah.
But they were so good at being like, hey, if you're going to come in here and put in the work, let's do it. And I ended up progressing really quickly, but also not too quickly that I was like doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing with, you know, moving too fast or whatever. But they were really good at being like, all right, like, let's get right down to it. And so I respect them a lot for that. But the student athlete really has to be like, let's do it or back off.
Yeah.
Because they can't help you if you don't want to come in and do the work. And that's a big part of it. And I think, you know, starting strength and conditioning and rehab and whatever sooner in the gymnastics world will give athletes the leg up when it comes to trusting those people to help them and not hinder them.
Yeah. And to that point, the other thing that it really requires too, and when Lou was on the podcast, he said this, is you have to have, like you're saying, phenomenal communication between all parties, but also the ability to give and take based on when the season is, right? So he uses this analogy, maybe you've heard it too, of like driving down this like 4-lane highway and everyone is driving their car, right? So in the summer, for example, like it's definitely like Lou is the person who's probably the majority of the work being done, and Lisa as well, because it's off season, you're all banged up. You want to get stuff from Lisa, you want to get stronger. But as you get to preseason, I think that humility from Lou to be like, all right, we're getting into like the gymnastic stuff. I need to slightly back off. And then in season, being willing and humble enough to take more of a maintenance care or a side role versus like, you know, obviously Bev and the whole team are like trying to produce routines that win. Right. And so I think that is something I see in successful programs who are able to implement lifting well, and it's beneficial. There's a very fluid communication about who's doing what when, and Bev's willing to give some up in the summer, and then Lou's willing to give some up in the season. Other programs that I see where it's just like everyone's running at each other in terms of like wanting to always be the person with like getting the majority of the cup, you know, a space. I think that's where it just falls apart. And then you start to just really add junk mileage. You know what I mean? The weight room's not productive. You don't really have the best performances. And that's hard to find a team of people who are all like, okay, I understand where I fit in this like role of people.
Yeah, we would always kind of laugh that our in-season lifts were really a joke, but it was nice because even though it was a joke to us, because we know what Lou can do and give us and really like elevate us with, it helped because ultimately we were doing some very low weight squats and doing ab stuff. And a lot of it was much more maintenance, you know, and now that I look back on it, I can't imagine not doing that because it even just kept our bodies in sync with lifting, even if it was like the bare minimum low level of lifting that we were going to do. We always were doing something that could keep your body warm to get back into lifting. And I loved that. And that's why even during season, when Lex and I would go in and lift extra with Lou, he never killed us. You know, that's not his job. He was like, if you want to do a little more leg stuff because it's helping you feel stronger, then let's bang it out. But if at any point it makes you more sore, we have to stop. That was always his thing. And we were really communicative with him saying like, we love this. It gets our bodies moving. We're not sore. But yeah, it's definitely that roller coaster of when are we going to go pretty much balls to the walls in the summer and build up that adrenaline and strength and endurance and whatever. And then during season, when are we going to maintain and really just be more, have some time together, keep our bodies moving, but also not hinder what we're really trying to do, which is go to the next level in competition.
Yeah. And to that point, I think the other thing that's really great is the maintenance care mode can also take over and absorb some of like the preventative and or rehab stuff that like it's very challenging to get into. Like in season, I remember all too well, like having like a class till 3 and then having to be at the gym at 3:30 and like to get back, get changed, get to practice and do all treatment stuff is so much. And so if that 1 time per week lift can fill in some of those things that Lisa maybe adds in or somebody has, like those small little 1%, man, not only do they make a huge difference when you get to the end of the season, but also like those half 1% are where teams separate. Like honestly, like it's so close and it's so tight that the people who are willing to do those extra 1% every week or every other day, like they really do make a huge difference at the end of the year.
Yeah, I remember my senior year, Lisa ran before practice a circuit of all preventative rehab. And she and Lou kind of tag teamed it. And certain stations were like, ankle bands. Some were like, shoulder exercises. And it was probably about 15 to 17 stations.
Yep.
And we loved it because it got you warm, that was before we did like our full, get warmed up, but it got you warm. It got you moving. It got pretty much every part of your body awake.
Nice.
And then you could start your day and you had done your rehab, but it wasn't, we were the same way, classes ended at 1, practice starts at 1:30. So it became crazy to get to the gym. Then you don't want to sidestep any of the important rehab preventative exercises, but that was her way of saying, great, practice will start at 1:30 and this is what we're going to start with. So everyone can do it because we all need it. And it was great. And everyone loved it. Really. It was like our favorite warm up because it was so helpful and we could feel the difference in what we were doing.
Yeah, I dig that. That's definitely, I think anyone who works in any college program, honestly, a club program, should take that to heart because that can go a long way. Something just popped in my mind I want to revisit is I'm good friends with John Roethlisberger from Power Monkey Camp and stuff. And something else I want to maybe like praise you for or just ask your thoughts about is like, not all the time is commentating like peaches and rainbows and everyone's happy, but there's some really tough times, I think, whether it's an injury or whether it's like some team is really struggling that, it's hard to commentate through that. And I think one of the things I really love about having people who really understand gymnastics is you can just detect way more empathy coming through the broadcast. And I think the one that pops out the most to me is I was listening to the live stream on the Olympics when Simone had a really tough day on vault, and John and I want to say it was either Bridget or I forget. Bridget. I was so happy that John and Bridget were the ones commentating there because they did a very good job of like nobody wants to commentate that. Like nobody wants to watch someone on their hardest day go through it. It's like it hurts at an emotional level, particularly for John and Bridget, because they know exactly what that stage feels like. But John and Bridget handled it like with so much grace. And they were like, we don't really know what's going on. And our heart goes out to her. And like, let's not jump to conclusions. Meanwhile, Twitter is like, just like torching, like this girl's a quitter and this and that. Like I was so grateful to have John there. And I think I'm also very grateful sometimes back to the Achilles tears is, as someone who's active in that research field, man, like sometimes mid-season, I'm like, when someone steps up for like a tumbling pass, I'm like, oh, like I'm real nervous. And so if something happens like that, like, man, it's so good to have you or someone who really understands the sport, like get through that awkward moment. Cause God knows that's the worst moment, right, for the athlete.
It's awful. And you don't want to go back and watch that meet because let's be honest, we all go back and watch it and hear the commentator just start spewing stuff, We've all been there. I've been there so many times. When you fall 3 times on an event, been there. It sucks. But ultimately, like, we're all human beings. We all have hard days and injuries happen either on national television, on a stream, in the gym, they happen. And so something that I agree with you completely, I would say it's one of the hardest things in the world. Or if someone has been, she got a 10 last weekend and completely has just a terrible routine the next week. Your heart goes out to them. For me specifically this year, one of the hardest things I had to do was commentate the beam stream at nationals when Michigan had just not the rotation they wanted. And I had to remind myself that I am an impartial person who's telling viewers what's happening, but I also am a Michigan alum who loves gymnastics, loves Michigan, and my heart is breaking. And so it's an odd line to kind of flirt with because you want people to feel that you're feeling for them because again, triumph or turmoil, that's sports. And it's our job as analysts and commentators to tell viewers how much it sucks without saying how much it sucks. But I also needed to remind myself that like, this is going to change who goes to the final day of competition. And my job is to share that information, even if I don't want to. And so it's really tricky, but definitely having the knowledge of what we have when it comes to these situations of counting falls, dropping falls, et cetera, and then injuries, of course, it's the worst, but it's something that you don't want to ever be in the scenario to have to handle. But when you do, you just have to be authentic, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the same thing as being an athlete, right? Like by doing sports and by signing up for it, you essentially sign the dotted line of like the highs and the lows, right? So like there'll be moments when you're under the pressure and it all goes well and everyone's hitting and it's like a fairy tale. And like, you want to be a part of those like insanely high moments where the team is doing well and you accomplish something together. That's like literally why we're in, like, one of the biggest reasons we're in sports. Right. But the cost of that comes with, there are times when you unfortunately have to stomach an extremely painful moment as a team or as a coaching staff or as that. And commentating is probably no difference, right? Like, you have those moments of injuries or unfortunate rotations where you got to get to that. But on the other side is like, you can be there when there's extremely amazing stories, like the Michigan State gets through, or something happens, someone hits, and it's like, oh my God, like, I just think I think it was like Pang Lee who like hit like a 10 in the last rotation, like that, like suspense and building. Like, how cool is that to be a part of something iconic like that? And then you're on record forever as the person who commentated that really, really well.
Yeah, I remember my senior year, we just edged Bama to go to nationals and made it to the Elite Eight. And it was one of the most exciting days of my life. I mean, I remember we broke the corral, we were screaming, we were crying. It was at home. It was one of the most exciting things in my life. And flash forward a couple weeks, we're doing a beam inter squad. It's our last practice before nationals. So as a senior, it's my last practice in Don Shepherd gym. And we do a beam inter squad, and my teammate and classmate Emma McLean was really pushing to get into the beam lineup. She was killing it in practice, like unbelievable level of difficulty, and her beam was beautiful. And so we kind of played around with two beam lineups. We did one with one person and one with Emma. And we go in to do it. I'm first. I fall in the inner squad. And then the second girl goes and like big wobbles, whatever. And Emma goes, she does a standing layout series. And on the first layout, slips and her hand goes straight down onto the beam and breaks 3 fingers. And is rushed to the doctor. So her last practice of her life, she breaks her hand. And I'm like an emotional wreck, whatever. And I remember Bev coming over to all of us, like the second half of the lineup hasn't even gone yet. And Bev came over to us and she was like, this sucks, but are we going to finish this practice with a good mindset for Emma? Or are we going to sit here and cry about it? And I remember all of us getting in a huddle, and Lexi, one of my teammates, she was like, I think we should just start the inner squad over again. And we were all like, yeah, let's do it. And we started over. We had a great inner squad, whatever. It was such a tough moment. But as athletes, we needed to decide in that moment, are we going to be down on ourselves and upset? Or are we going to push through? Because what if this were a situation that happened at a meet and we need to redo our mindset? And I just remember that so vividly, us being like, this is terrible, but let's just do it. Killer beam rotation in the inner squad. And then we all cried because she got hurt the last day. But ultimately, it was like a mindset thing. And as athletes and as analysts and fans and commentators, we need to know that you can change your mindset when you need to get done what you need to get done.
And I think that's such an important skill too, is like, I think there's equal parts concern when you're like overly pessimistic and you think nothing's going to go well, but there's definitely an equal amount of bad that comes out of like toxic delusion or like toxic, like just insane amounts of like false optimism, right? Or hope. Yeah. Like, you can be upset with the situation and still choose to move through it the best way you can at the same time. Totally. I think sometimes you hear, particularly in coaching, like I've been in a part of some consulting sessions where I'm like, all right, just like do a practice and I'll help you out with whatever. And I'm like, do you hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? Like, it's not all going to be okay. Like, it's not like it's just magically going to get better. Like, this sucks, bro. Like, this sucks. And as an athlete, there's nothing worse than when you know it's awful and someone's like, listen, it's all going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. It's like, no, it's just not.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. And that's the hardest thing to do. And I worked with Abby Eiler, sports psychologist at Michigan. We call her the queen. She's the most amazing woman ever. And part of what she worked with our team on was mindset and goals and working as a team together. And, you know, being a fan in the stands when Michigan won the national championship, their first 3 routines were not great. And they had a complete mindset shift. And the last 3 competitors kicked it out of the park and they won a national championship. And so the body and the mind are connected. And if you can tell your mind what you want your body to do and really, truly focus on that, you totally can do it. But you have to change the mindset, because if there's any little bit of doubt, I better not fall on this, you'll likely mess up. But if you're like, yeah, I got this, like, I'm going to destroy this, kill them with kindness, kill them with confidence, fake it till you make it. It works. It really does.
Yeah, and particularly at that level, right? Whether it's NCAA or elite, like we're talking about, like you really do have to get into the mindset of like you feel relentless and you also feel bulletproof. Like even it's not going to always go well. Like 100% you're going to fall, 100% you're going to have injuries, whatever. But if you go into it with like, oh, I hope I don't blow it, or like, oh, I hope something goes wrong, like how can you even have a fighting chance of like having something crazy? It becomes luck or an accident when it happens instead of the alternative mindset, which is you approach it relentlessly. And when it doesn't go well, you pick up the pieces. But better to lean into like full on, it's going to go well and I'm going to crush it than any moment of doubt.
Totally. And I think like in terms of your body and how you preventatively train with strength and conditioning and all of your treatment, that's the same too. Is it's like if you're prepared for that moment because of what you've done on the back end, it's going to be great. But if you go into it and you're like, oh God, I'm not strong enough for this, or I'm exhausted, like my legs hurt, I'm tired, it's hard.
Yeah. And you want to have that peace of mind to know that you left no stone unturned in the process of getting to where that moment is, right? Like if you, let's just be honest, right? If you cut corners, if you don't do all that strength, if you have a couple extra nights out drinking, if you're not really doing like all the things you should time-wise to like get in ahead of time, like all those like shadows of creepiness and doubt creep in during the biggest moments. Instead of if you, I went to bed and didn't go out and I managed my time well and I did those extra exercises and I'm on top of like fueling myself well, you can have that confidence as like a tailwind pushing you forward when you get to that super big moment and that doubt doesn't creep in.
Exactly. And we all have fun in college. I mean, I'll be completely honest. Sure. I've gone to some lifts. Lou's been like, Liv, are you okay? And I'm like,
Same.
But that's also a part of being a college athlete. Like if you're going to decide to do that, you have to get up and go and give your 100% of the day to lift, even if you feel like trash. That's your decision. And that's what you have to do if you want to be a part of a team that takes it to the next level and wins championships.
Yeah, man, you got to pay the piper, right? You can't have all the all
you
the fun.
Can't have it all. Yeah.
And on that, now that we're kind of like moving into macro world, is like, I'm curious now, I'm always so fascinated by talking to athletes that are like closely removed from their career and are now kind of like somewhat still involved, is I love to hear like looking back on the college situation, looking back on the road to college, like a lot of judges and coaches and athletes that are in college listen to the podcast. And I'm curious to know if like you had a magic wand, like would you change anything about either the way college gymnastics is structured or format to like better help the athletes? Or do you feel as though like things are pretty much, in a good stride?
I would say, and I don't know if people agree with this, the new format of the back-to-back regional days they're having a day in between. Personally, I think it makes the sport more exciting. I know that they did it for TV reasons. I know having 4 teams on the floor at the end and not having buys is significantly better. Do I wish more teams could be there on the last day of competition? Absolutely. But I think when we talk about March Madness or anything that gets people unbelievably excited about sports, this is one of those things, because look at what this last season did when it came down to teams making it to nationals. It's exciting and it allows for upsets. They suck, but it allows for teams to elevate and really change the game. In terms of what I would change, I mean, I think we did a very good job of maintenance. I remember my senior year on day 1 of regionals, I looked at Bev and I was like, my other Achilles is not feeling great. And ultimately we put 5 people up and 5 scores counted and we advanced to day 2 and we were fine. But I think the hardest thing is competing floor so much, training it on the hard floor. Let's be clear, doing a double pike onto a resi and doing a double pike on the hard floor, different. As much as we want to say it's better for your body, 100%, it's totally different. And so when it comes down to that training for perfection, as well as then competing a couple days later, it's so hard. I don't know what the change is there. It's not like you could just like omit floor at a meet one time, but it is really tricky when it comes to your body and that floor. And I don't know why on earth this is, but the floor at Chrysler is a cement block. No one knows why. They've changed it a couple times. It's the worst floor in the history of the world. And every athlete I talk to now now that I've made friends with tons of different athletes on different teams, they all go, "What's wrong with your floor?" I'm like, I have no idea. I can't tell you. I don't know.
Is it in a basketball gym or is it in a concrete gym?
It's basketball.
Yeah. And so these are all like so many things we're like actively brewing on. That's why I talked to Ellen before the call. Is I think a couple things. One is, remember from it's a survey data. So that's really important. But two is, when we went into the study, I was ready to pull out like, oh my God, the kid who had severs is going to be the one who tears when they're in college. The kid who only does floor and vault and is a specialist is going to be the one who tears their Achilles. And none of that was true from the survey data, right? It could come out, it could shake out later, but we found is actually, it was total volume was the thing. So the kids that did elite when they were younger and were doing 20 to 30 hours, 25 plus hours when they were little, and then the ones who were doing all around in college and doing D and E level skills, those were, let me make this very clear. Those were the people who were more statistically significant to report tearing their Achilles in college. So not a 1-to-1 you equaled, but
Right.
that was mind blowing to me, which was like, oh, maybe this is a workload thing. Maybe this is an overall global workload thing. And this is not a, a double layout problem or a specific volume. And I think that's really where, if we want to see substantial changes in all injury rates, not just Achilles tears, right? And that's the problem, is that Achilles tears, you cannot not report. Like, obviously, when someone tears their Achilles, but there are a lot of gymnasts who have back pain and hip things and all sorts of other problems that don't get spoken about. And it really is this tug of war and this dance of total volume, right? Whether it's total volume on the floor, I think we should actually be doing more to prepare people on the real floor earlier with like plyos in the off season and slowly ramping up intelligently through. We've changed that substantially at our facility where a lot of college gymnasts lift with us. But like, that's definitely something we have to find the balance of, is like, what is the ratio of meets to how long the preseason is? Is it like 1 or 2 less meets and we start in January or February because coming back from December break is brutal? Maybe. Right. Is it a longer preseason? Like, I really don't have the answer, but I ate my own words pretty hard when I wrote the thesis, and the hypothesis for that paper was like, it's definitely severs, it's definitely old injuries, it's definitely specialists. And it was not, from what we saw.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the hardest thing too with gymnastics, and anyone listening who has been a gymnast or is coaching gymnastics knows, you don't get, your off season really isn't an off season. Like, you can never truly stop doing gymnastics without having major setback in your skills and whatever. I mean, it's always that joke when you go on vacation, you come back and you try to do a kip on bars and you can't do a kip because your body is just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And so ultimately the sport just requires so much maintenance on the gymnastics level, as well as just the physical wellness and physical like strength side of it. You know, like when you stop doing bars for a couple weeks, Godspeed. Because getting back up on a bar and doing a clear hip or a toe handstand after you have been doing, your shoulders are going to hurt for about a week. And it's really tricky when you talk about like volume, because how can you stop gymnastics for a certain set amount of time, or, have less practice days, when ultimately it is a sport that needs to be practiced constantly, or you're going to lose your skills and your endurance and whatnot. And it's tricky. I mean, I was the type of person that could take a day off and be completely fine. And I had teammates that were like, I have to at least do something. Like, my body has to. And so it becomes like how can we work through that so that athletes can feel comfortable saying, I need to take a couple days off and just like rejuvenate my body from the pounding of gymnastics, but still come back and feel confident enough to do your routines and your skills and whatnot, and not feel nervous because you had 2 days off.
For sure. Yeah. And I think this is like where, in the medical world, we have these things called like consensus statements, which is essentially like you get, 2 or 3 of what are considered maybe the smartest people in the room for these different topics. And you put them in like a room for a couple of days and you say like, let's just hash out what maybe we think the best advice as of now is what we have. And I think that still has yet to happen with gymnastics. Is like, obviously I'm biased, right? I see, like, I'm treating 7 people for Achilles tears right now. Clearly I'm biased in what I think maybe should change. And I need to sit down with someone who has had multiple years of success, like with level 10s and elites. And we also need to find the best biomechanics researchers. And we also have to find, like, we just have to sit down and have an idea about like, okay, where we are right now. And what is that tug of war between, 3 months off like baseball does is definitely going to be a terrible idea. But right now, this like constant year-round grind is also probably not a good idea. So what's that middle point of like, is it like 2 weeks off and 2 weeks of a slow ramp back up? I don't know. But like, that's like for sure what I think is the only way out of this. Is what's crazy to me that like as a young coach trying to coach like JOs or clubs is like, there's no guidelines on like how many hours should a 12-year-old train? When should we go level 10? Like when's safe to start doing D passes, E passes? Like, cause right now, I mean, we got like kids that are 10 years old flipping Yurchenkos to their head, you know, because that's part of like what they want to see for a 12-year-old level 10. Right. And I think like that's crazy. You know, that's really, really crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the progression of skills is so tricky too. And I remember when I was little, you know, I could throw anything because I weighed like, you know, 80 pounds or something. I could throw anything. But then when you go through puberty and your body changes and like the different types of weight that just changes your like center of gravity, those same skills become really hard. So you almost have to relearn everything. And that's so tricky because ultimately it's like, are you going to do level 10 for 8 years? Some people do. And they're really successful level 10s and they go to college and they have an amazing career. But it's like, at what point is it smart and safe to start doing a Yurchenko full? You know, at what point? A lot of these young girls who are learning these skills at like ages 10, 11, 12 don't even have the upper body strength. They're still itty bitties.
Yeah.
And so doing a Yurchenko with your coach just flipping you like this is so different than trying to like use your muscle and your strength to block off the table and do a vault. I mean, it's so different.
Yeah. And that's something that excites me about the era that we're in now, which is, you know, I had the most classic like coaching and the most classic like education, like tried and true, just like grunt work and just do it until you get it right kind of thing. Right. But now as I'm, you know, years removed and I can look back as someone who's a researcher now, is like, we've never actually seen what would happen long tail if we tried something slightly different. If we had a good system to manage workloads and we had like people starting to lift when they were 12 and maybe pushing out like the hard D level skills till like 15 years old, and recruiting, thank God, is a little bit different now where like you can't talk to somebody till like sophomore, junior year, because that was for sure a huge elephant in the room, which was like, you're literally recruiting an 8-year-old. Like, this is ridiculous. Like this person is an infant. Like there's no way they have any idea if they're going to college. So like there's a lot of factors, but I always scratch my head and I'm like, guys, like we have nothing to compare it to. Like we don't know what would happen if we had a good workload system. We had people like Lou who were teaching club level coaches and strength coaches of what they could do when they were 15, when you can't train a lot during puberty, but you can do a lot in the weight training room. And we don't have, for sure, like, you know, shooting myself in the foot is like when I was a younger medical provider, I was for sure out of touch with like what gymnasts need for medical care. So I know it's like a giant fear of the unknown about like, well, if we do all that and we take a year or two to figure this out, like what if we don't have good success in college recruits, or what if we don't make the elite national team competitive anymore? And like, it's terrifying for sure. But right now it's not good. Like the injury rates and the performance and the amount of kids that quit gymnastics because of mental health or physical burnout, it's like, it's massive. And so like, I don't know, I think we owe it to ourselves to at least try something slightly different, you know?
Yeah. And hopefully, I mean, a big hope, you know, I think Lou and Lisa should really just do like a travel show and talk to club coaches just about, I mean, even just the benefits of, you don't even have to go to a weight room, like even the benefits of holding a couple dumbbells and doing some things to strengthen your legs. And, you know, Lisa is great about saying like, do your rehab. If you need like, you know, I got dry needling on my Achilles scar. If you want a really funny story, ask Lisa about my first time getting dry needling. I bawled my eyes out because
as someone who does dry needle, it's definitely an experience.
I'm scared of needles. And Connor Ackerman,
perfect then.
Connor Ackerman was a gymnast at Michigan, and he ended up being our student trainer my freshman year. And Connor took me to get dry needled, and I bawled my eyes out in a towel while she did like my upper shoulder, and there were just like mascara marks on the towel. It was hilarious. So Lisa always like jokes with me about that, but I religiously did it my senior year on my scar because it broke up the scar tissue. It made my foot feel much more mobile, and I loved it. And as someone who hates needles, to say I loved dry needling means that's a lot. But not everyone has access to those resources. I mean, Michigan is like a playground of resources. And so when it comes to like the basics of, you literally need a couple weights, a floor, and an athlete, there's a lot that people can learn that can start the ramp up. So then when you go to college, you're not like, what the heck is lifting or what physical rehab? You're like, oh, okay, I'm familiar with some of this, but this is the next level of it when you have those facilities and access to those things.
Yeah, there's 2 points there that are really important. One, the first one is that constructive feedback maybe to the strength coaches in colleges. We work with a lot of club athletes that are tens or elites and are going to college and they're with us like summer training. And then obviously a lot of people come home. Sometimes the gymnastics strength coach or whoever, like I'm not sure if the coaches are looking at it, they send back a packet to these freshmen who have never lifted before, have never done anything in the world. And it is literally like hieroglyphics. Like myself and the head strength coach, Duesh, who writes all the programs, we looked at a program this week. We're like, yo, what the hell do they want you to do? I have no idea what this program says.
Right.
Like, how in the world do you expect a gymnast who has never done a deadlift before or a squat to do this? Like,
right.
that's extremely intimidating for someone who's never lifted before in their life.
Yeah, and the last thing you need is to try squatting or do a deadlift and do it wrong and have your back be completely tweaked out, you know? Yeah. Then you're back to square one when it comes to helping with those things. I think that's so important too, is like the general, like, we do basics on bars. There's basics of strength and rehab. Like ultimately you have to make sure that you know how to do it. So when you ramp up and do trickier things or more weight or more repetitions, you're not doing it wrong, because that's just going to hurt you more than it helps you.
Yeah. And to that point, what happens is they get a strength program that's crazy. They've never been taught. They get hurt. They tweak their back. And the feedback loop to the coaches is like, oh, well, strength conditioning is dangerous. Like, we shouldn't do this. And it leaves a really bad sour taste in your mouth. And if I was just a coach and not a medical provider or a strength coach, I would understand. I'd be like, okay, if you're getting hurt and no one knows how to teach you this, like, we're not going to do this. We're just going to spend more time in the gym. But yeah, that's not a problem with strength conditioning. That's an application error. That's a human error. You know what I mean?
Totally. Which is like a very important distinction. You know, like gymnastics conditioning is so different than strength and conditioning that you do in a weight room. And so those things, although both great in their own way, like if you're doing them wrong, what's the point? And you can also do, you know, different types of gymnastics conditioning, you know, leg lifts and climbing the rope and whatever. Like those things you can still do, but that doesn't diminish the fact that lifting is really important.
Yeah. And I always make the joke too with people like coaches that are trying to understand this. I'm like, okay, well, you would never just like, all right, you know what? I think we want to learn a Tkachev today. So let's start with just doing Tkachevs and we'll see what happens. Like, let's figure it out as we go. That's the exact same thing that's happening when you're like, all right, let's lift. I heard lifting's good from a podcast. Let's try some back squats. You know, like that's terrible.
Yeah, right? Like I've never done a Shaposh half before, but just, you know, it's fine.
Give it a whirl. Give it a whirl. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
They're like, oh yeah, Kovacs sounds so fun. Let's just double tuck over the bar and just chuck it.
I don't need my teeth. Who needs those?
Yeah, right.
Back to your point though, I do think to your point is that it's crazy the resources and the finances that some college programs have, and it's literally a dream come true. You have everything you could possibly need at these big schools. And I do really empathize with coaches and clubs that are, you know, shoestringing a budget or do not have an access to this. But the internet is a beautiful thing, man. And there are so many great resources out there. And I think I definitely have seen people like Lou and Dave, who's with Alabama, who's a friend. Like I've definitely seen more colleges be willing to offer up their resources and those people that they have. Like, man, there's so many college coaches that go to summer camps. Obviously they're recruiting a little bit, but like they donate their time or get paid their time to go do some education or do some technical development. Like if you could have some sort of program at a college level, I guess this is like a hopeful message to all college programs that we work with, is just like in the summer, like just be willing to like loan out or, you know, charity out your strength coach for 2 things per summer, just to like have an online webinar or like go to a local gym and teach people the basics of hinging and squatting and stuff. Like if every program just was able to offer their strength coach, their AT or their sports psychologist, like their nutritionist, just a little bit, like that would be an enormous value add to all the people at the club level who don't have $1 million to spend on all these people's salaries, you know?
I could not believe the resources at Michigan. It was almost like overwhelming to your mind when you walk in there and you see an underwater treadmill, you see an Alter G machine, you see all of these things that like my favorite thing in the whole world was a Woodway treadmill, because I love running, but it hurts my body so much that I really struggle with it. So when I was coming back from my Achilles, I, you know, put the little pants on and the Alter G and took like 80% of my weight off and was running at 20% of my body weight, but I was relearning how to do like heel toe, you know? And I did it in the underwater treadmill too, which is like the coolest thing ever, but underwater is just so different. Yeah. So using the Alter G was just this experience where I didn't feel nervous about actually doing the full motion of walking or running. And then you build your way up to 100%. And I would, you know, I would go up there in the weight room and I would run on the wood weight and my body never hurt. I never had to say to Bev, like, my calves are sore because I ran, you know, my endurance.
Woodway is a self-motorized treadmill for those that don't know. There's no power. You run up further and it goes faster. It's like a self-motorized treadmill.
It's amazing. And
it's curved.
It's bouncy. It's really bouncy, you know, like you feel like you're running on air. And it's amazing that facilities have those types of that kind of stuff that you never even imagined they could have.
I dig it. I don't know how we got to this corner of the conversation, but I like it.
I don't
know. something I'd be remiss to not bring up, because I know there's a lot of young gymnasts who are going to listen to this podcast, because every time we have like someone from a big school and they want to know all the secrets. But so looking back on your like recruiting journey and your process to getting to Michigan as hopeful, like, you know, level 10 and stuff like that, what are the pieces of advice that you would have to the gymnasts out there that are like sophomore, juniors, and are working their tails off to try to get to some big entity?
Yeah. First off, I had no idea what college recruiting and anything was. Nice. I went in totally blind. My mom and my dad were huge aides in helping me figure out what to do. Hannah Floor was a gymnast at Michigan. She actually was my recruiting coordinator, really, at my gym, helping me navigate. And I never knew I wanted to go to Michigan, so to speak, but I walked on the campus and I fell in love. I would say my piece of advice is, if you have a dream school, there's no reason why you can't go. And I've heard a lot of people say things like, oh, you know, Michigan or UCLA or Oklahoma is my dream school, but, you know, I'll talk to some of the other schools that I'll likely get into. How do you know? What if they need exactly what you have to offer? What if you're unbelievable at one or two events and that's exactly what they're looking for? So my piece of advice would be to be almost overly communicative in terms of, you kind of can't say anything wrong. Just be clear with what you want, what your strengths are, what things you're working on that you're really excited about, how your body's feeling. Watch meets. Tell the coaches that you are excited about the way that their team interacts with each other, or the way that the coach gives advice before a beam routine. That's always something you've wanted to experience. Like, those are things that college coaches want to know, because you're not just coming with gymnastics, your personality, your vibe, your energy, your dedication. That's all a part of recruiting and coming into a program.
Yeah. And on that too, is like, obviously finances are an issue with like an athletic scholarship, but that walk-on game and academic money is something that might be a really big deal, because if you can just get your foot in the door and kind of make ends meet for some of your finances, but then show up and be good at one or two events, and goodness knows in the freshman year particularly, there's all sorts of shuffling, injuries, behavioral issues, you know, like some things don't work out. So sometimes there are some major shakeups in the lineup, or like people who no longer want to stay involved or change events or stuff. And you never know when you might find yourself as just a hardworking kid. I can think of one guy in particular who was very skeptical about going to the school. I don't want to obviously out anybody, but he was like, I don't know if I could make it there. And like, I'd be like, you know, a really tough walk-on. And he went as a walk-on and became like an absolute monster on one event, and then kind of good on two other events. And sheerly because of his work ethic and being kind and being really good at a couple things, not only did he get a spot back on the team, but he also made lineup on that one thing. And he's now like a staple. So he went from being like, oh, there's no way I could ever compete for that team. And now he's like legit like an anchor for one event. And he's a big part of their team. So I think, don't undercut your own legs off before you try, you know.
And just being a walk-on, it doesn't mean you're less important.
Right.
When I was on the team, so many of our walk-ons were key. And some of them ultimately ended up earning scholarships. If the money is available, your coaches will analyze and go, this kid works so hard and we have money. Why would we try to bring in a transfer or whatever when we could reward our athletes on the team for working hard? And so I would say another piece of advice is, if you're coming in as a scholarship athlete and someone else is coming in as a walk-on, you both have a completely equal shot at making lineups, making a name for yourself, contributing, and helping your team to go all the way. There's no reason why a walk-on is any less important than a scholarship athlete. And walking onto a team doesn't mean you failed. It means that you're just given the most amazing opportunity and make of it what you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important point. I'm glad you said that, Zoe, because there's oftentimes this weird cultural, not like undertone or whatever it is, but like the scholarship athletes are more important than the walk-ons, and this person, because they do all around and they hit a lot, has some special privilege over the person that doesn't. But like, you get nowhere in college gymnastics without a team of people all working together in the same way the staff is. But like, if you want to know the number one thing I've seen that's toxic to a team undercutting is when that drama comes up, which is like, this person has more value or is less as the team, and this person is not. Like, one, it just makes you feel like shit as the person who's on the walk-on, but also like, it's not true. It's just not true.
Ultimately, 6 people go and 5 scores count, and one sole person or 2 sole people who do all around, they can't win a meet by themselves.
Yeah.
And so we always say, you know, Lisa would always say to us, the people who are 7, 8, and 9 as well, the backups, are unbelievably important, because at the end of the day, you want to have people that can go in that are fantastic. And 9 out of 10 times, God forbid someone get hurt and you slide into that spot and you kill it, there's your spot. And so you have to just remember that even if, you know, one event isn't necessarily your best event, but you're a backup on the event, you totally could make the lineup if you keep working hard and make your way into it. There's just the sky's kind of your limit, but you have to be the one that decides how much effort you put into it. Because if you're just like, well, I'm a walk-on, I'm never going to make it in any lineup, you probably won't. But if you work really hard and you ask for corrections and you learn new skills over the summer, I can't see how you wouldn't earn your spot.
Yeah, and to that, the judges don't have a list of who has scholarships and who walked on.
They do not.
They're not cross-representing
what they see. Sometimes they close their eyes.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for another day. But you're no less valuable simply because you walked onto a team at all.
For sure. Yeah. And then the last topic I want to touch on, and I intentionally left way towards the end so that nobody lit us on fire, is something that I have a lot of frustration with, is how the Twitter Gymternet world has evolved in the last 5 years with, I guess, the fine line between passionate fanship and just trash, I guess, is the only way I can put it. Like, there's sometimes when I see stuff, I'm like, all right, you can get excited, talk about scores, talk about judges. Like, that is the fun of being a fan, right? And every other sport has that, you know, competitiveness, or that, you know, you want to make snarky memes about it and it's funny and it's lighthearted and it's cool. I see a lot of things on Twitter, particularly in season, when, you know, someone's having the worst meet of their life or something is going on with an injury, coaches, whatever. And I just see some stuff on Twitter, man. I'm like, yo, you guys realize there's human beings behind the tweets that you're putting out? And like, it's honestly caused me to like not be on Twitter sometimes for like a month at a time, when like, one, I'm so head down doing stuff, but two is like, if you work with these athletes and you truly are someone who's been an athlete or understands what they're going through, is like, you would never in a million years say to their face the things that you're putting out behind an anonymous account, you know, and putting out. And like, I try at all times to be very communicative to people who listen to the podcast about like holding the trigger finger, particularly in season. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on that as a former athlete, as someone who's obviously on Twitter and is commentating and seeing things flying around. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that since I graduated, the Twitter gymnastics, the Gymternet, has really become much more prominent. Something is working in PR that I've realized, and I knew before, but I've really realized, is that Twitter is free speech. You can say whatever the heck you want. You know, if you want to say something about an athlete or about a routine, go right ahead. But at the end of the day, these athletes follow these accounts. These athletes watch these things. You know, it's hard because at the end of the day, it's a sport and we want to have constructive conversations about it, because that elevates the sport and gets people talking. But when there's conversations that have to do with like, oh, this person sucks because of X, Y, and Z, and I don't know, they're going to look at that, and that just really brings you down. You know, I get frustrated because at the end of the day, if an athlete does a great routine and a judge decides to give it a 10, but she hopped, not the athlete's fault. And I think the Gymternet all agrees on that. Yeah. Everyone's like, it's not the athlete's fault, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, and I'm at fault for this too, of calling out when it's not a 10 and it gets a 10, you want that athlete to enjoy their moment of getting a 10. And 9 out of 10 times, the athlete probably went, seriously, that's the routine you're going to give to? Like, you're joking, right? And so I know I need to be better at calling out those things, because at the end of the day, I want that athlete to soak in the excitement of getting that score and enjoying their college experience. But if I could say one thing to the Gymternet as a whole, think before you post. We all need to do better about that.
Tuck it in drafts for a couple hours. Just tuck it in drafts.
Text your friend it instead. If it's really something you feel passionate about that you think is going to start a conversation that's constructive to our sport and to an athlete or whatnot, that's fantastic. And just do it. But if you're someone who loves college gymnastics and you're a fan, but you're tweeting nasty things about a program or a person or a coach or an athlete, they look at that. And what if that was you? So just think before you post. And as a commentator, I feel like it's my job to help with that conversation and only positively talk about the athletes and give them recognition and talk about their achievements. And if they have a mistake, show some empathy, but also explain why that mistake might have happened or whatnot. And my hope is that the rest of the Twitter world and the Gymternet can also imagine that you're commentating when you're posting on Twitter. Just would you say that on national television? And just challenge yourself that way. And maybe we can make that space better.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? There's outward and inward. Outward being is, like you said, is like 9 out of 10 times, for better or for worse, the athlete knows what's going on here, right? They know, like, oh, that was definitely not a 10, or like that was not a, the start value mathematically doesn't work out that way. So they know. But also too is 9, the other way, if they have a terrible routine or something happens and they get hurt, clearly it's like the top of mind for them. Like the last thing they want to do is go on Twitter and see replays or see people talking about it. Like, it feels good to go on and get like, hope you're okay and that kind of stuff. Like, that's where you can be positive there. But on an inward point of view is like, as a human, when you tweet those things, like, think about like what position in life you are in. Like, to go to the point where, like, to get a rise or to get some excitement or get some attention, like, you have to just be gnarly on Twitter. Like, man, that's kind of a really like self-audit moment of like, is this really how I want to live my life? Is like waiting for the next big drama thing to instantly tweet out to kind of get a rise and get a couple likes and retweets. Like, come on, there's got to be, you got to audit your life and be like, what am I missing here? That the void I fill was with like Twitter toxicity. Like, be careful.
Totally. There. And I know there's people out there who are like huge LSU fans, huge Florida fans. And whenever someone says something negatively about one of those programs, they freak out. And I get it. I totally get it. I mean, a lot of times people will say Florida's overscored, and almost every team gets overscored. A lot of, at least an athlete on,
particularly at home. Particularly at home.
Except at Michigan. Let me be clear. We don't get overscored at all at Michigan. Away, we have been overscored. But at home, it's, at least when I was there, it was rare. It's changing a little bit. But it's just like, if we're all this obsessed with a sport, let's just make it good.
Yeah.
And all be a part of the good, because at the end of the day, it's growing. And we just want to talk about it in a positive manner.
Yeah, that's a fast way to turn away people who are new to the sport when you hear, the dramas within themselves and all that kind of stuff. Totally. So I encourage you, for the better of the sport, be better. Be better, Twitter.
Exactly. Be better to better the sport.
Cool. Well, Liv, thank you for your time. This was wonderful. And I appreciate all you're doing with commentating. I appreciate all the love you're giving back to the sport. So shout out your social handles so people can follow you during the season.
I will. It's Lil Liv K. You can look up my name, Olivia Karas. And if you have any questions, want to chat with me in DMs, let me know. I am a very open person, an open book. I'm first to admit if I say or do something wrong, but I'm also here to talk about gymnastics and how much I love it. So I'm an open book.
Sweet. Thank you so much. We will get this put together and put up in a few weeks.
Cool. Thank you, Dave. This was so fun.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.